Welcome to the Bookers Alliance podcast, where we hold the pencil and the pencil is power. Coming at you right now is your host, Marky Mark, along with the man, the myth, the legend, Frank Donaldson. Join us as we discuss the ever-changing landscape of professional wrestling. So hang on tight, you jabronis, and enjoy the ride. All right, welcome in, everybody. Pull you up a seat under the learning tree as we talk about today's episode on the Bookers Alliance podcast. We're going to discuss one of the greatest of the great, and we want to also, in this introduction, send out a formal apology.
Absolutely.
As we did not include this gentleman in one of our archived episodes of The Best Talkers. We are going to talk about the one, the only, Jake the Snake Roberts in our episode today. Frank, how you doing, man?
Oh, I'm good. But yeah, we definitely got to send out that apology. I mean, as you know, I reached out after I heard the episode and just thought, oh my God, how do we do this? How do we overlook this guy when we're talking about best talkers in the business? But again, you know, charge it to our heads, not to our hearts. We were young. We were rookies in this whole podcast thing, and we were just excited to get something on record. So, you know, we hurried up and put it together, all excited, like, man, we really want to talk about these guys that, you know, made such an impact on us. But, you know, just watching that A&E, I mean, I had realized we made that mistake right after we recorded the episode.
Right,
it was like 2 days out before we even published. I was like, you know, we may need to pull it back and all, but we didn't, you know, we weren't on top of how to do all that. We were like, we'll fix it somewhere down the road. Well, this A&E biography is really giving us a good, you know, inspiration to fix it. So got to take advantage of it while it's hot.
Yep. So in case you don't know what we're referencing, the A&E biographies, this is a series that they are in the second season of currently, a passion project that WWE has going on with A&E right now, going through this biography of certain superstars. And again, last night their episode was on Mr. Jake the Snake Roberts, and what a powerful episode it was.
Yeah, I mean, I think that word sums it up as a whole. His story is powerful. You know, who he's become now is powerful. It just, I mean, all of it. As I was watching it, I remember texting you while I was watching it, like, oh my God, you know, you're not going to believe what happened, what he goes over in this story here. But I mean, my goodness, yeah, it definitely made an impact on me. Made an impact enough that I reached out to my co-host over here, and it made an impact enough that we're going to do a whole show about it today.
Absolutely. So want to start off kind of preferences, just like if you go and watch the biography that aired last night, there are some sensitive topics that are in his backstory. We're going to leave some of those more sensitive areas to the biography that A&E showed. We'll let you discover that on your own free will. But kicking us off here, we just wanted to start about, you know, talking about his early childhood and some of the trauma that he went through. So he was the son of I don't know, would you call his father a famous wrestler? Would you call him famous?
So his contributions to the business, he was around. People knew who he was. They said he was, over 7 foot, over 400 pounds. So, I mean, obviously he stood out back in those days. But, yeah, when they bring up his name from back then, I mean, and I'm the wrestling historian here. So I know who he is now because he's Jake's father. But arbitrarily, I wouldn't have known who he was, to be honest with you. So, I mean, he was big enough for his time. But, as far as in the annals of history, with, as Jake told in the story, with all the stuff he was involved in, I don't think he'll ever be a name in wrestling that anybody's in a rush to bring up.
Yeah, that's one of those deals where unfortunately they get kind of scrubbed away from the annuals of history, so to speak.
I mean, and when you hear Jake's version of the story, and you hear his sister Rocket Robin's version, they didn't even have Sam Houston in it, who's Jake's other brother. He wasn't even involved. I don't know why, but he wasn't involved. But you could see the trauma in all their faces as they talked about it. So, and that's one of those situations where I get it. I completely understand.
Yeah. And then, like we said, if you want to get into the details of the nitty gritty of kind of what all happened, by all means, go back and watch that biography.
That's Jake's story to tell.
Yeah, that's Jake's story to tell. We'll let that man tell it.
That's not our place. So,
but, going in, he was talking about how he actually had no aspirations of being a wrestler. He wanted to be an architect.
When Jake the Snake Roberts said on camera, I wanted to be an architect, I was in the buildings. I think I was doing something else, like, around the house or something, had it playing in the background. But that was one of those things that just drew me in. As you're sitting there, you're like, wait, what?
Yeah.
Jake the Snake Roberts is going to build me a structural building. No, absolutely not.
Yeah,
no.
you wouldn't think that would have been one of his passions.
Not at all. But I mean, when you see him talk about it, though, like when you look at the joy it brought him on his face to talk about, being an architect, it's amazing that he was that interested in it. I mean, I never would have placed that, but
no, but it seems to be that he was looking for some backing and support from his father. Unfortunately, he never got that. But he wound up in the sport of professional wrestling, thinking, that might be the way to make his father proud. And they showed some of that archive footage of him, and good Lord, he was a wiry, lanky person.
Yeah. So, yeah. When Jake came out, I mean, you could see he was fresh out of high school when he started, because, Jake had that typical, 140 pounds soaking wet look, and still had that same mustache that he's wearing now. It's widened out a little bit now, but he still had that same look. But Jake, looking at him back then, I also wouldn't have thought he wanted to be a professional wrestler.
Correct.
So, back then I probably would have said, looked at him and said, yep, architect.
But it covered some of the background of him bouncing around from promotion to promotion. And then finally it kind of hit his stride as soon as he discovered the move that a lot of people say that was one of the dirtiest, nastiest finishing moves of all time.
Oh,
in the DDT.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, if anybody would say it, I bet you Ricky the Dragon Steamboat would say it.
and everybody, that is covered in the biography. And by all means, if that's a piece that if there's going to be a piece you pay attention to that one, because even in the recording that they played during the biography, you can hear the thud when that man's head cracked off the concrete.
I mean, and looking at Ricky, I remember Jake said he thought he was dead.
Right.
And Jake has a podcast out there too. DDP Snake Pit, him and DDP do a podcast weekly too. So I listen to that occasionally as well. I've said on other podcasts in the archive, I listen to a lot of podcasts. So because I'm passionate about wrestling, I love listening to it. So, hey, these guys were there. These are their stories. I like getting that first person perspective. But nonetheless, he said on there, he said when Ricky's head hit, he thought he had killed him. He said he was afraid. He said he warned everybody involved beforehand. He said, if I do it, I'm gonna kill him. He said there's no way to. And Ricky promised him, no, I'll protect myself. Ricky the Dragon Steamboat said on the biography, he said, when it sounded like a rocket went off.
Yep.
The way his head hit. And, and just looking at him after, you could see it was bad. I mean, Jake started pointing to the back immediately after. And on his podcast, he said when he was pointing in the back, people thought he was trash talking to fans. He said he actually yelled straight to the back, I told you guys. He said, I told you guys, because he told them what was going to happen. So when you watch the documentary, you'll see him point right to the curtain and start throwing his hand up and start saying something. On his podcast, he actually covers that. He says he told him, I told you so, because he thought he had killed Ricky the Dragon Steamboat.
And he talks about how that move kind of happened by happenstance. It was, the guy that had him in a headlock, and he tripped and he face planted him on the mat, and everybody was like, dude, you got to do that move again. That was awesome.
Yeah.
And he's like, I didn't even know what happened for a minute. He's like, I had to put it together. But then how he came up with the name, the DDT, just, some initials in the newspaper.
Yeah. I remember when I was young, when the DDT came out, I thought it was an acronym. So I'm like, what does it stand for?
Right.
And I remember people telling me drop dead twice and things like that. But I do remember that. It was a nerve gas or some kind of poisonous gas that was called DDT, and that's what they banned. So as a young child, I never put that together. Obviously, the adults I was asking weren't going to tell me that.
Right.
Like, as I'm running around here, DDT, DDT, they're not going to tell me, oh, don't cheer for that. But, but yeah, like you said, it just kind of fell into the move, literally and figuratively.
Yep.
Fell into the move. And I mean, it made him one of the biggest stars in wrestling. It made that one of the now most bastardized moves in wrestling, but
other than
one of
the
the
super
most
kick, yeah.
well, there you go. But one of the most devastating moves in wrestling at that time.
Yeah. So, that move put him on the map, got him noticed, but it also got him noticed by none other than Vincent Kennedy McMahon.
Yeah. So that's the call.
Yep.
When you're in every business, in every sports entity, at some level, you're waiting on what they call the call. When that call comes, your life changes immediately. And Jake went over that in the biography. He said, Vince told him, I'm going to put you in these neon pants and these, knee-high snakeskin boots and blah, blah, blah. And Jake said, he's like, oh, my God. He said, I'm about to tell. Then he said, they were going to give you, a 20-foot python. And Jake said, I was about ready to tap right on out then.
Yep.
He said, I was going to tell him, you know what? No, this ain't gonna happen. You take all that and stick it. Then he said Vince wrote a number down on a piece of paper while he was telling him the story. Jake said when he saw all those zeros back there, Jake told him, you can put me in whatever you want. He told him, hell, make the neon as bright as possible, make the snake as big as possible. He told,
as Ted DiBiase says, everybody's got a price.
Oh yeah, well, again, when you're struggling to make it, and then all of a sudden, what do they say? Don't look a gift horse in the mouth. Well, Vince McMahon was the gift horse. So, I mean, you're not really going to say, let's talk about, no, you're going to take that check and cash it all day long. You'll overcome fear of snakes and everything.
So that launched Jake's career. He went on into the WWF at the time, went into some crazy storylines with The Undertaker, with Honky Tonk Man.
Before we get there, though, so Jake talked about his WrestleMania 2 match where he had the guy foaming at the mouth.
Yep.
And so we're looking into doing a trivia episode here coming up soon, so we're working on it. But I got some trivia for you. Who was that wrestler that Jake put down in WrestleMania 2? I know you know it.
No, I don't.
Oh, my God. Well, all right. So, little disclaimer. I'll be the one answering the trivia questions whenever. Anytime trivia comes up, apparently that'll be on me. George Wells.
Oh, Lord.
All righty then. George Wells, WrestleMania 2.
Nope.
There's a performer in WrestleMania 2. You have no
Jobber
idea who he
number
is.
1.
Good. There's no jobbers in WrestleMania now. Everybody in WrestleMania is a star. But yeah, George Wells. I don't know how he did the foam. But yeah, George Wells
Alka-Seltzer, man. Come on.
Yeah, I guess. But
the tricks of the trade.
That foam looked like it had some snot and stuff in it. So that was gross. But yeah, nonetheless, George Wells got dumped on his head in WrestleMania 2. That was Jake's introduction into WrestleMania.
Yep. So we went into, he had storylines, obviously, with, like I said, Undertaker, Honky Tonk Man, Andre the Giant, Macho Man. Obviously, that was where his stride, where he was peaking within the WWF. And as a youngster, I will never, ever, ever forget the freaking snake bite on the Macho Man.
Oh, my God.
I'll never forget that, man.
So, as usual, I remember where I was when I saw that. They showed that on a Saturday morning wrestling show.
Yeah.
And when they showed it the first time, they showed it just like you saw it on the documentary. Everything was, for there for all eyes to see. Consequently, weeks later when they would show replays of it, they put a big red X over the screen because people were calling the networks. I mean, they were traumatized by this.
Scarred millions of little kids.
Yeah, they were. I mean, they showed in the documentary. There were kids in the arena crying when it was happening. I mean, had no clue what was going on, but when you go back and look at it, that snake had clamped in pretty good on Macho Man's arm. So had I been in the arena too, because I'm not a big fan of snakes. So had I been in the arena, I also would have been one of those little kids crying.
Yeah, Jake. I think he was making a concerted effort to try to get it off the Macho Man, but that snake had latched in, man.
Yeah, well, Jake's effort was, this is going to be one of the biggest, most memorable storylines in wrestling.
But did you see him?
And we're gonna go ahead and ride this thing out.
Did you see him laugh about it though?
Oh yeah, I mean that's because Jake saw more dollar signs. At that point, Jake was smiling because he saw them zeros that Vince had originally wrote down. Yep. He saw a couple more zeros get added onto the back of that. And Jake's like, oh my God, this is gold. I mean, just gold.
But while he was hitting his stride there was something about Jake, though, that always captivated everybody watching when he popped up on the screen. The way that he talked to you. Let's talk about that for just a minute. That man was able to captivate you, and I think it was Hogan that said it in the biography. He made you lean in.
Yeah. Well,
he made you want to lean closer and just listen to what he was saying.
I mean, so he made it to where you didn't have a point.
Right.
Like at the time, you had the Hogans, the Warriors, the Macho Mans, all those guys, cutting their promos. But, even Ric Flair, we talked about to great talkers. We talked about Flair, Dusty Rhodes. All those guys, they would get more energetic as the promo would go on. And as you get more energetic, you get louder and louder and louder, to whereas before you know it, you're Hulk Hogan. You're rumbling in the ring and,
right.
Jake never did that.
No.
Jake would talk to you. He'd start at a even keel pitch. As the story went on, though, he'd get lower and lower and lower and lower
yep.
and lower to whereas you had to be in all the way in, or you're turning that volume up real high to hear everything he said because A, you didn't want to miss any of it because, it was riveting stuff that he was saying, but B, you had to lean in because he would talk you down to, to bring you to his level so you would feel what he was saying. It wasn't just, Hogan would throw a promo and as a little kid, I'm all excited. I'm all fired up. I'm ready to go. But Jake the Snake would throw a promo and as a little guy, back in 86, 87, when I was 6, 7, 8 years old, he's cutting these promos. And I can remember you get those chills, that they always talk about that chill that runs up your spine. Mm-hmm. Some of that stuff he'd be saying, you may not at that age, I might not have even really understood what he was referring to, but the way he said it would have a chill run up my spine. It was just that ominous, creepy delivery that he had that just made him great.
Yeah, and even if you take a moment, everybody, and watch the biography, there's some shots in there where they're really close up on Jake's face. It's in black and white, and he's talking, and he's sitting there talking about his life. He's talking about stories, and then when you sit there and you listen to him, you're really sitting there going, "Is this like Jake the Snake as the character, or is this the man that I'm hearing talking?" And that was so key to the what and the why that he did. He blended everything so perfectly together that you really didn't know.
Oh yeah,
you were left as a mystery.
Absolutely. Well, so at his Hall of Fame, they showed clips from his Hall of Fame, and what were the fans chanting at him when he was accepting his Hall of Fame?
You still got it.
And Jake proved, and that was, 2014? So here we are almost 10 years after that. Jake still got it.
Yeah.
Because he on that documentary, he still drew you in. He still made you stop what you were doing to listen to what he was saying. And, that energy he brought, he still brought that when he talked about those dark days, when he talked about those hard times. Unlike Dusty Rhodes' hard times promo, when Jake talked about his hard times, you felt those hard times.
Yeah.
You could feel that there were days that he didn't know if he was going to get through those hard times.
It's just like a gut punch, man.
Yeah. Like I said, it was so real.
Yeah.
It was more real than I think everybody had anticipated, but he kept it real. And, just reading his feedback from after he saw the documentary air and everything like that, he said, he really appreciate how real they kept it.
Right.
Because, and he said in the documentary at some point, he's like, this story might help somebody.
Yeah.
If it only helps one person, then it did its job. But the way he delivered it and all that, if there's people out there that are having some of those same afflictions he dealt with, if you can't take something away from that, you're in big trouble.
Absolutely. So let's move into kind of one of the harder parts of the biography, and it talks about unfortunately his fall from grace, how he struggled with addiction, whether it be just drugs and alcohol or just other addictions that plague everybody. We're all human, unfortunately. You can't ignore some of this stuff, and you really can't look at him and go, "Oh, I wouldn't have been there." You don't know. You didn't walk a mile in that man's shoe. You have no idea.
As we stated, his upbringing, there aren't a lot of people who would have survived,
right,
more or less thrived with that type of upbringing. So, nobody, definitely not me or you, but nobody should be attempting to judge that man for what he did or didn't do. He's doing that enough for himself. As you watch the documentary, he punishes himself enough for his shortcomings that anyone else watching or around the situation or anything like that should only appreciate him for what he is now, because a lot of people don't get to that point. So,
Right.
but yeah, his fall from grace was kind of rough to watch. I mean, watching some of those in rings, like, when he was doing those indie shots, and you could see he was, messed up at the indie shots and just, kind of a shell of himself, like who he was and who we all knew, who those fans paid to come out to see. When you put Jake the Snake Roberts on the moniker, you're going to get butts in seats, because they're like, man, I haven't seen Jake since, 96 or whatnot. I got to see him. That was my favorite. I got to go. Or, I hated that guy. I got to go boo him. But, when you see him out there just as a shell of himself, it's just like, my goodness, know, it's hard to watch.
Yeah, and luckily, though, for Jake, one of the men who was watching during that time was Diamond Dallas Page, DDP, and it's amazing that Jake had somebody that was able to reach out to him and try to pick him back up and get him going back again. There's an old saying in life. You're fortunate if you can count the friends that you have on one hand, and to see DDP step in and do what he did for Jake, that man truly saved his life.
That's exactly what he did. He saved a few lives. Jake the Snake, Scott Hall, of course. He's even working with Buff Bagwell currently, I believe. Yeah. So DDP's a godsend for some of those guys that, they talked about it in the biography. Jake was fresh out of rehab,
yep.
and already had fallen off the wagon. By the time DDP got to him, so he was fresh out of WWE provided rehab, and he couldn't get it together. Being around the business wasn't good for Jake. Jake said it. He said, I had to get out of the business because the business was killing him. There's current, stars that are out there now that it seems the same way. We'll talk about that in other podcasts later on. But, for Jake specifically, had DDP not done what he did, because DDP didn't just help him get better, right? He brought him into his house.
Right.
He told him, hey, you've got to be, this is a 24/7 deal. This isn't, I'll see you 1 hour here today, 1 hour that day, one of those deals. This was a 24/7, in-home recovery system.
Yeah.
Where DDP, they said DDP told Jake he was a couple years away from being immobile. He would never be able to walk again if he kept going the way he was going. He took Jake from that into doing DDP yoga to get to be where Jake can move around, walk. Jake actually had a spot on WWTV where he came out with the snake. He's a current roster member on AEW as we speak, at least current. None of that was in the picture 10 years ago.
Right.
Had DDP not done what he did for Jake Roberts, we may be talking about Jake Roberts in a posthumous way right now, and not in a we just watched him in joyous moments at sometimes on his biography. This could have been a completely different podcast had it not been for DDP.
Right. And I think, seeing that process, I did watch the documentary, The Resurrection of Jake.
Yep.
And seeing what he had to go through.
Yep.
It just made him more endearing.
Yep.
It made you want to just root for him. It appealed to that side of all of us who want to see people do good.
Yep.
And we want to see them do better. And the work that he had to go through, not just physically, but mentally, the fact that, he fell off some days, and DDP, dude, he lit into him at times.
Yeah.
But
he told him the truth.
He was holding him accountable.
Yeah,
right.
He told him the truth. He made him actually look at what the situation was for what it was, instead of, where other people would, enablers or whatnot that are out there would just say, hey, it's going to be okay. We'll get you through it. Come on out with me and have a drink tonight.
Yep.
That'll help. That'll ease this pain that you're going through. And,
yep.
Of course, as we know, for an addict in Jake's style, that one drink is, it's not a snowball. It's not a snowball effect. That one drink is literally jumping off the cliff for a guy like him.
So they kind of wrapped it up talking about his current days, what he's doing with his family. Everything that they showed there at the end was phenomenal.
Yeah.
But I did walk away from that looking at, some things internally, just, that I took away from it from watching his story. Sometimes you look at what he's doing, and he's truly believing that what he's doing is helping people.
Yeah.
Somehow, some way, sharing his story, telling his tale is opening the eyes of people, and maybe they're going, damn, that's me.
Yeah.
I mean, we all struggle through things, whether it be addictions or just something as small as just, a trait that we may have. We all struggle through things, but to see him go through stuff and to come out on the other side better, but also seeing the fact that he still struggles.
Yeah, yeah.
You see the turmoil that he fights every day, and God help him, especially when he talked there at the end. He's got 4 kids that are trying to repair their relationship, and 4 kids that don't even want nothing to do with him.
And I mean, he said flat out he understands. He said, I know who I was for, the first portion of their lives. He's like, so he understands it, and it's unfortunate, but I mean, it kind of is what it is. But as far as addiction goes, anybody who's struggled with addiction knows there is no fix.
Right.
There is no, okay, I'm all better. That's a lifelong struggle until the end of time. Now you can get better. You can get in better shape. You can always, but any addict will tell you they're one drink away. They're one, drug away from the whole bottom falling out. Everything falls apart. But what I took away from the documentary, and I mean, you referenced a little bit ago the Resurrection of Jake Roberts documentary. I'm thinking all the way back to Beyond the Mat. I mean, the Jake that we saw in Beyond the Mat was not a good situation.
Right.
Some of that was during Jake's worst. Some of the stuff he referenced last night was some of the worst Jake Roberts there ever was. We actually lived through some of that in Beyond the Mat. But what I took away from the biography was the end, when he was driving in the truck and he was talking about how he's one of the guys that's doing the right thing now. The excitement that he had. I mean, he had a childlike excitement about himself, that he was so excited that he was doing the right thing, because he had never done it before. I mean, to him, it was brand new. It's, it's like the first time you do something you've never done before, you love it. I was going to make a reference there, but I'm going to leave that be. You guys know where I'm going here.
We know where you're going,
but nonetheless, the first time you do something, it's the best thing in the world. Now, but to see the joy on his face when he talked about, hey, I'm one of those guys that's doing the right thing now. Never been that guy before. He had that childlike enthusiasm about himself, and Jake's 60-some years old. I mean, you would think he's seen it all, done it all, but that was one thing that he never did, and that was do the right thing. And he's proud of himself for it, and damned, I'm proud of him for it. I mean,
absolutely, man. Absolutely. And again, we were inspired to do this topic today just by watching the biography of the A&E had on for Jake. Like we said, man, go out of your way, give that a watch, man. That's really some powerful stuff. And even though we talk about wrestling and we're centered around that on this podcast, not to be heavy about things, but man, if you watch that and you realize, man, I might be one of the ones struggling there, feel free, reach out, get help. That's the best thing to do. Don't be ashamed of anything. We all struggle. It doesn't matter what it is. Doesn't matter how small or insignificant you think it is. If you're struggling, reach out. If you got a friend, reach out. If you got family, reach out. If you ain't got nobody, find somebody. There's all kinds of help out there in this world in this day and age, man. Not reaching out, there's no reason for that.
No, definitely not. I mean, and like you said, we're a fun-loving podcast. We have a good time on here, but at the end of the day, the real world's out there. This is our little getaway from the real world, where we can get together and, have a few laughs, do what we do, record stuff. Hopefully you guys enjoy, get some laughs out of it too. But at the end of the day, the real world is awaiting everybody outside that front door. And it's hard for some people. Not everybody walks out the front door and, and it's roses and, daffodils and white picket fence. And everybody doesn't have that world out there. There's people out there struggling with a lot, just a lot. And yeah, if you're listening and you're one of those people, like Marky Mark said, find some help, reach out. Reach out to somebody. Like you said, if there's nobody you feel like you can reach out to general help. Just talk to somebody, because let me tell you, the person that is able to help you is out there. They just don't know that you need the help.
Right.
But if you put yourself out there, and I mean, I know that's saying a lot. I know put yourself out there, if everybody could do that, then the world would be a miraculous place. So I know it's not as easy as it sounds, but before you do something that may not be the most optimal solution, try putting yourself out there at least once. See what happens out of it. Just try it, please.
Yep. All right. With that, we appreciate you listening in to today's podcast. We know it was a little bit of a heavier subject, but we just wanted to go out of our way and just talk about that and how powerful and impactful that episode is. Give it a watch, and we'll come back next time with a little more joy and laughter. So with that, everyone, we bid you adieu.
Peace.
Today's podcast was produced by SBP. You can find our podcast on all major podcast platforms. Also connect with us on our social media accounts. Search for the Bookers Alliance on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.